Everything you're hearing right now is the result of about 30 seconds of holding my iPhone up to a creek near my house and some creative sample processing. And through this, I've created a unique, multi-layered instrument that is truly my own. In this video, I want to talk about both what I've put together and why it's worth spending some time doing this yourself, even if you don't usually design your own sounds. Let's get into it. Here's my instrument. I've called it Creek Pad. It has two layers. The first layer is a pad with some filtering, delay, and reverb. And the second layer is a plucky ARP made from the same source Creek sample that fades in and fades out over time depending on the amount of this macro. And then exposing certain parameters as macros, I was able to create a bunch of, call them snapshots, but they're really like presets here that cover kind of an interesting variety of sounds. I've really enjoyed making these presets and playing around with it. I've already incorporated this into some tracks that I'm working on. I think the arpeggiated layer is so cool and makes this just like really uniquely mine. I've made this available for purchase on my Gumroad store, but now I want to take you through the steps of taking a field recording, making it tonal, bringing it into a sampler, exposing a couple macros, and maybe even adding that extra ARP layer so you can kind of maybe get some ideas of your own, build this yourself, and I hope this will be somewhat educational and inspirational for you. So let's get started. I'm dragging in my field recording here. Here it is. So maybe let's just constrain this a bit, add some fades, bring in an EQ, get rid of any sub frequencies, so we don't need those. Let's just cut it off at 100 for our purposes. And now we need to take this snippet of flowing water and make it tonal. So the way we can do that is bring in another EQ, bring out a resonance and its harmonics. Now what I'm gonna do, because I certainly don't have this committed to memory, is go to Google and say, how many hertz is C3? It's 130.81 hertz. So I'll select one of my nodes here, go to the frequency and type in 130.81 hertz. Hit enter, bump my Q up, and now pull this up. And it still doesn't really sound like much, but if I duplicate this, it now kind of sounds like someone's like blowing on a glass bottle, which is cool. But we can make this a little more interesting sounding by adding a few nodes of harmonics. So if we multiply 130.81 by, let's just say 2, 3, and 4, we can get 3 more areas in the spectrum to bring up. So I'm gonna go do that now. So now if we select our sample again, press Command B to bounce this out, it's now ready to be dragged into our sampler. So open a sampler, bring that sucker in. The root node is already set to C3. So now we're playing the creek. Now something we can do is switch this sustain mode to back and forth. So it'll like, if it reaches the end of the sample, it'll start going in reverse. We can bring in our start point here, add some crossfading. Something that is nice to do to prevent it from sounding super samey every time you press a note is make the start point random. So if we go over to modulation, turn on LFO2, turn this to random, turn retrig off, and then send it to sample offset, and then bring up the amount. Now you can see when we play, see the little line? It's different every time. So now let's press Command G and bring this into a group so we can expose some controls. And let's start mapping some macros. Let's say I want manual control of the attack of my sound. So I can either have it start right away or have it fade in like a pad. So what I would do is right click on my attack here, map to macro 1, attack. Maybe I want to do the same thing with decay, sustain, and release. Now I have precise control over the amp envelope of my sound. So this can now be a pad, a pluck, or anything in between. Great. An idea I've just had is I want this sound to have that like ramping filter effect. So I could do this maybe inside of the sampler, but sometimes I just like using the dedicated devices. So I'll bring an auto filter into my instrument rack here. I'll demonstrate the kind of effect that I want to get. So I'll bring my frequency down a little bit, and I want to turn on my LFO. And I want the wave to be like a ramp down. And what I want to happen is this. So let's drag in an envelope MIDI here. We'll place it in our rack. We're gonna map this to our rates. It sounds like this. Let's drag down the sustain. Actually, we can just turn the sustain off. I don't want this to be affected by velocity, so we'll turn that off. We'll bring our decay down, make it a little exponential here, maybe like 5 seconds. And we'll lower the amount. Yeah. That's sounding good to me. Maybe we'll leave this as a set it and forget it setting, but we'll map our overall frequency to a macro as well. I've also added some filter drive and resonance here. All right, let's add some effects. Let's add some reverb. And now I think I want the reverb to really, really emphasize the high end here. So I'll turn on my low cut on my input filter, turn off the high cut. I'll turn this low cut or low shelf on my diffusion network on, and I'll bring this down all the way, and I'll push up the highs. Increase the decay. And now we get this kind of interesting noise wash. And maybe we'll just map our dry wet. This is a totally fine bass sound, so now we can open up our chains and duplicate this to start working on a second layer. And I'll delete my reverb, I'll delete my auto filter, I'll delete my envelope. So now we're just back with the plain sound. I actually don't know if this is gonna sound good with the arpeggiator since I already have this super rhythmic main layer, but I guess let's find out. So I'll come in, drag in an ARP. Let's solo this so we can get our settings right. We're gonna unmap, 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 and make this kind of a plucky sound. That's kind of interesting. Maybe let's, actually we'll use our filter built into the simpler here. We'll make it a high pass. And I think maybe this will be more congruent sounding if we actually change our filter LFO to a synced rate. And we'll have to go remap this here. So we have a stable layer of the arpeggiator rhythm and then this unstable ramping filter. Maybe we can pan these a little. That might sound interesting. So like 30 right, 30 left. Whoa. So again, we can expose to the macros settings that are important to us. Maybe I want to have control of the arpeggiator's rate. Maybe I want control of the steps so I can have it go up octaves as well. So I'll map this as well, but let's say I only want it to go up the max of 2 octaves. So what I do in this instance is go over click map, find the transposed steps, here it is, and bring it down to 2. So now it's constraining it. And maybe the last thing I'll show you how to do here is make this layer fade in over time so that as the filter is going crazy on the main layer, this isn't totally interrupting it, but then it'll grow into that space. So let's bring in another envelope MIDI. We're gonna map this to our chain volume, which I've sent all the way down to -infinity, and we will make it modulate only up and set this to 100. Now if we turn off our velocity, because I'm not interested in that, and bring up our attack to, I don't know, 2.5 seconds. See it grow in. And let's have it maintain this level. Maybe constrain how loud it gets. Maybe I want to map the amount of this to a macro so I can control manually how much of the ARP layer we're going to hear. This is what it sounds like at 100. But if I bring it down like below 50, notice that you still can't really hear it. So this makes this macro kind of annoying to use, but there is a way that we can address this. I'm gonna bring in a shaper. I'm gonna adjust the curve by clicking and dragging this node. I'll press shift click to delete this node, and then I will option click to make it a shape like this. I'm gonna set this to manual. I'm going to unmap from my macros here. I'm gonna change this to remote mode and map this to my amount. So now this manual knob is controlling the amount. So now if I map this instead to macro 9, we can see that I now have more control over the actual usable range of my amount. Because now by the time I'm a quarter of the way up this macro, I'm actually already 70% up this amount. So if you ever wished you could set the curve of your macros here and were frustrated that you couldn't, this is an interesting workaround. Maybe I want to add some effects to both of the layers to kind of glue them together a bit. So maybe I want some OTT, reverb, and a bit of bit crushing. And now let's bring the OTT amount down so we don't hurt our ears. And I actually think I want my ARP layer to be super tonal. I'm gonna go in and delete my copy of the Creek instrument and just bring in an operator. I want a sine wave. Okay, we're not done. Actually, I want to bring in an echo, so when I let go... Do you hear how when I play this and I let go, the arpeggiated layer just stops? So what I want to do is increase the release here that is controlling the volume of this layer. That helps a little bit, but if I add an echo, now it fades out. Increase the feedback. Yeah, now we're cooking. And I'm really liking how this is sounding, but there's one more adjustment I want to make, which is that I'm going to go back to my main layer. I don't like that towards the end of the ramp, I'm still getting that pulse of the filter. By the time the filter LFO slows, I want the amount to go down as well. So I'll go back to my envelope here and create another mapping. I'll map this to my LFO amount and we'll have it set to 100. So now watch and listen. It brings the LFO amount all the way down, so now we're just hearing the ARP. I think that sounds a lot cleaner. I'm happy with that. I'm gonna fold down everything, and now we have these effects. If we want to create a nice clean instrument, we could now, with everything included, we could now shift click into everything and make another group. You could map all your macros to the outer macros. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 macros if we want to control these outer effects. So now we've got this unassuming little effect track that has so much stuff going on under the hood. We can make colors for all of these, and we can randomize our settings. And this is a great way to get presets. If we expose this and we like something, we can click this new button, click here, save it. We can rename it to my snapshot. I really think this is some of the most fun you can have in Ableton. It's just such a cool and unique way to be creative, to kind of turn yourself into effectively a plugin designer, and the choices you have to make about, okay, what do I want my macros to be like? What are the most important controls to me in this specific instrument? I think it really gets you thinking out of the box in ways that can be really beneficial to you down the line when, say, you're working on a project and you need a certain sound. You can go through, if you've saved a bunch of these, and scroll through your own boutique instruments and effects. So as I said, the Creek instrument that I demoed earlier in the video is going to be available for purchase on my Gumroad store. I hope this inspires you to kind of get creative with this stuff, because I really think it's just a great way to experiment with sound, level up your sound design, and craft a sound that is really your own. Bye.